Good afternoon. Welcome to the Analyst. Today we'll be taking up 7 newspaper articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express and discussing them. The handout for the same will be available in the description of this video for your kind perusal. Please have a look at that. The first article that we'll take up is related to micro, small and medium enterprises, as the CEO of Niti Aayog has observed that India does not have enough MSMEs that can scale into large companies. The second article is related to bioeconomy, as the India Bioeconomy report has been released by the Department of Biotechnology. Additionally, we'll take up 5 articles in the simplified section which will be helpful for your prelims and mains preparation. Now, the first article is related to the MSMEs in India. The context behind it is the statement of the CEO of Niti Aayog, who has observed that India does not have enough MSMEs that can be scaled into large companies because of regulatory hurdles, technological upgradation and skilling challenges. So we will discuss the initiatives taken by the government to promote the MSMEs in India, the challenges that they face and the suggestions to improve their contribution to India's economic growth. This is important in GS3 under the topic Indian economy and issues related to planning, mobilization of resources, growth, development and employment. First, how do we define the MSMEs? The definition of the MSMEs has been revised by the latest budget. The classification of MSMEs is done on the basis of their investment and their turnover. As per budget 2025, the micro enterprises are those enterprises which are having an investment of up to 2.5 crore rupees. That is the investment in the fixed capital, plant and machinery, and if they have a turnover of up to 10 crore rupees. Whereas the small enterprises are those enterprises which have an investment of up to 25 crore rupees but more than 2.5 crore and their turnover is less than 100 crore rupees. Likewise, the medium enterprises are those enterprises which have an investment of 125 crore rupees and a turnover of up to 500 crore rupees. Now, why are these significant? Why do we want to promote them? Because the MSMEs, they are like the growth engines for India's economy. They contribute significantly to our economic growth. For example, their contribution in terms of the gross value added to the GDP has been increasing. In 2020, it was 27% and it has increased to more than 30% in 2022-2023. Likewise, the export contribution from the MSMEs has been increasing. It has increased 3 times in value from 2020 to 2024-25. In terms of the percentage, the total percent of exports that is contributed from the MSMEs, it has increased again from 43% in 2022 to 45% in 2024-25. This data is up to May 2024. Plus, they are contributing to manufacturing also. Of all the manufacturing output in India, 36% comes from the MSMEs, the micro, small and medium enterprises. They contribute to rural development also as they generate employment. The MSMEs are the second largest employer in India, second only to agriculture. Agriculture is the largest employment provider in India. The MSMEs, they employ about 7.5 crore people in India. Plus, they ensure social inclusion also. In a diverse society like India, it is particularly important because 2/3 of the MSMEs in India are owned by the backward classes. Plus, they contribute to the innovation, the research and development also in the Indian economy. Now, let's have a look at the initiatives taken up by the Budget 2025 to promote the MSMEs in India. One, it ensures that the credit guarantee cover for the MSMEs is enhanced. The MSMEs are able to borrow more. For the micro and small enterprises, the credit guarantee has been enhanced from 5 crore to 10 crore rupees. That is, they can borrow up to 10 crore rupees without any collateral. since the MSMEs do not have enough collateral that they can put at stake for getting loans from the bank. Therefore, that guarantee is given from the side of the government so that they can get collateral free loans. An additional credit has also been announced by the budget of 1.5 lakh crore rupees that will be provided in the next 5 years. For the startups, this credit guarantee has been increased from 10 crore rupees to 20 crore rupees. Simultaneously, the guarantee fee has been brought down to 1% for the loans in 27 focus sectors to promote Make in India, Startup India. And there is an announcement to provide customized credit cards for the micro enterprises which are registered on the Udyam portal. They will be getting the credit cards with a limit of up to rupees 5 lakh that they can instantly withdraw, and 10 lakh cards will be issued in the first year itself. The budget proposes that there will be a new fund of funds for the startups which will be set up. There is already a fund of funds of 10,000 crore rupees. This will be in addition to that a fresh contribution of another 10,000 crore rupees in addition to the existing government contribution. Plus, the budget proposes that there will be a new scheme for 5 lakh women, SC and ST first time entrepreneurs. The women, scheduled castes and scheduled tribes who are venturing into entrepreneurship for the first time, they will be provided term loans of up to 2 crore rupees during the next 5 years. Plus, they will be provided online capacity building for entrepreneurship and managerial skills. Additionally, the budget 2025 proposes to set up an export promotion mission. This export promotion mission will provide export credit to the MSMEs. Plus, it will support the MSMEs in tackling the non-tariff barriers that are imposed by the other countries when the MSMEs are exporting their products, their goods and services. And it ensures support to the MSMEs for the cross-border factoring also. In addition, the focus is now upon the labor-intensive sectors. The MSMEs which are employing more people, which are labor-intensive, they are focused upon by the government. For example, the focus product scheme which is proposed for the footwear sector and the leather sector because these generate more employment. Likewise, a new scheme is proposed for the toy sector because the government of India wants to promote the cluster setting up in the toy sector. In the toy manufacturing, they want to upgrade the skills of the people and to ensure that India becomes a global toy manufacturing hub since it generates employment and we can export also. There is a proposal to establish a National Institute of Food Technology, Entrepreneurship and Management. Likewise, the government wants to promote manufacturing also, manufacturing and clean technology. To promote manufacturing, there will be a focus upon the MSMEs in the National Manufacturing Mission, and there will also be emphasis upon the clean technologies, the adoption of the clean technologies by the MSMEs, for example, the production of solar photovoltaic cells, production of electric vehicle batteries, production of wind turbines, etc. Additionally, the budget 2024 had also come up with a few proposals in the support of MSMEs. For example, a new mechanism was announced in last year's budget for facilitating the continuation of bank credit to the MSMEs during their stress period. Last year, there was a ruling also by the Supreme Court which had observed that the banks should consider the stress period. They should look for early signs of stress among the MSMEs before categorizing their accounts as NPAs, non-performing asset accounts. Additionally, the turnover threshold of the buyers has been decreased on the TRADES platform, the Trade Receivables Discounting System. What is TRADES platform? The MSMEs, they sell their goods and services to the government departments, the central public sector enterprises and large corporations, etc. In turn, they receive money. If there is a delay in the payments, the MSMEs will be facing a liquidity crunch. That time, they can upload the invoices on the TRADES platform. The TRADES platform is an electronic platform, the Trade Receivables Discounting System. The financiers, for example, the banks or the non-banking finance companies, they will be bidding upon the invoices uploaded by the MSMEs. The MSMEs may choose to accept a bid, that is, the financiers are offering to pay an amount immediately. The MSMEs are waiting to receive a payment for their goods and services, but that amount offered is usually less than the invoice value. If the MSME chooses to accept a bid, then it receives the funds immediately. After that, the risk of not getting the payment from the buyer is transferred to the financer, to the banks or the non-banking financial companies. There is no way to get that money from the MSMEs then. The MSMEs will be able to operate using that liquidity that they got. So there is a reduction in the turnover threshold of the buyers who can be onboarded on the trades platform from 500 crore to 250 crores as per budget 2024. Additionally, last year's budget announced a financial support for 50 multi-product food irradiation units to ensure and promote the food processing industry in India in the MSME sector. And the e-commerce export hubs were to be set up in the PPP mode, public-private participation mode, to enable the MSMEs and traditional artisans to sell their products in the international markets also. Now let's have a look at some of the other initiatives also that have been taken up by the government to support the micro, small and medium enterprises in India apart from the budget. The government came up with the Prime Minister Vishwakarma scheme. The Prime Minister Vishwakarma scheme is to promote the artisans, the craftsmen engaged in the MSME sector, to ensure that the quality of their products is up to the international benchmarks. They are provided training also under the Prime Minister Vishwakarma scheme. There is a 5-day basic training program which is held. They are integrated into the global value chains. They are provided collateral free loans also, because the artisans, they need loans, they need funds to set up their enterprises. In addition, the MSMEs can register through the Udyam registration portal. Through the Udyam registration portal, they can register freely in a paperless manner and they can self-declare themselves. This registration process is not based upon the prior verification of the documents of the MSMEs. Rather, it can be based upon self-declaration itself. Additionally, this will ensure that they are integrated into the formal economy where they will be able to access credit better. There is the scheme Employment Generation Program, Prime Minister Employment Generation Program. This provides the margin money. This is a credit-linked subsidy scheme. It provides a subsidy to the beneficiaries who are availing loans for the setting up of their new enterprises, new micro and small enterprises. Additionally, credit is provided through the credit-linked capital subsidy scheme also. If the MSMEs want to upgrade the technology that they are employing, they want to invest in better technology of plant and machinery, they can get the subsidy, capital subsidy, through the credit-linked capital subsidy scheme. There is the setting up of the Credit Guarantee Trust Fund for the micro and small enterprises. The guarantee is provided from the side of the government, from the side of the Credit Guarantee Trust Fund, so that again they are able to access the funds without any collateral. Then the government has the RAMP scheme in place, raising and accelerating MSME performance. Again, this is to ensure that the MSMEs are able to get market access, they are able to sell their goods through better governance, and they are able to access credit from the market also. The Aspire scheme is to promote innovation, is to promote rural entrepreneurship also, essentially to promote the MSMEs in the rural areas. For that, the business incubators are set up and promoted. Additionally, there is the Sphurti scheme, that is scheme of fund for the regeneration of traditional industries. It is to promote the cluster building of the MSMEs. The clusters and collectives are set up for the MSMEs so that they are also able to enjoy the benefits of economy of scale. Likewise, the MSME Sambandh put in place by the government is to promote the public procurement from the micro, small and medium enterprises. It has put in place a public procurement policy for the MSMEs. As per this policy, at least 25% of the procurements by the central ministries, central departments, central public sector enterprises have to be procured from the MSMEs only to promote their share in the procurements. The MSME Samadhan is to ensure that the problem of delayed payments to the MSMEs can be resolved and the dispute resolution can take place at the earliest date. There is financial support which is provided by the government through the Z certification, that is zero effect, zero defect scheme. That is again to ensure that the product's quality that are given by the MSMEs is better and up to the international standards. There is the promotion of digitalization among the MSMEs, for example, the initiatives like Digital Saksham, Udyam Portal, eShram Portal, to ensure that the compliance can also happen digitally and there is minimal human interface. And the Supreme Court also stepped in 2024 and it observed that the banks must identify early signs of stress in the MSME accounts before classifying the MSME accounts as non-performing assets, as NPAs. But still the MSMEs face quite a few challenges. They face the challenge of registration at the first step itself. The registration process is quite lengthy. At times there are bureaucratic hurdles also, and there should be a more efficient single window system that should be put in place for the registration by the MSMEs. Likewise, the formal credit access also is not sufficient. As per the Standing Committee on Finance report, the report titled Strengthening Credit Flows to the MSME Sector, only 16% of MSMEs in India are able to get formal credit. Otherwise, they have to resort to informal sources of credit which charge higher interest rates. And the technology adoption among the MSMEs also has been lagging. This lag has been primarily due to the financial constraints only. Therefore, when the credit lines are open, they will be able to upgrade also better. Otherwise, they have to resort to initial public offerings or registering themselves on the stocks. Additionally, there are skill gaps also. There is a shortage of the skilled workforce which is required to work in the MSMEs, and the market access is also not sufficient. There are tariff and non-tariff barriers imposed by the countries where they are exporting their products. The export support infrastructure within India is also not sufficient. There is the burden of regulatory compliance also. Frequently, the tax laws in India are changed. Frequently, the GST slabs are also changed, which leads to additional regulatory burden upon the MSMEs. Additionally, there are infrastructural constraints that they face. For example, the access to power, essentially the access to cheap electricity. Electricity in India is cross-subsidized. That is, the electricity provided to the households, it is subsidized at the cost of electricity which is provided to the industries, which is at a higher rate. Likewise, the logistics cost in India is on the higher side. It is in the double digits, almost 14% of the GDP in India, whereas the logistics cost in the Western countries in advanced economies is in the single digits, about 8 to 9% in USA. Likewise, the operational cost for the MSMEs is higher because they are not able to effectively enjoy the economies of scale. They are operating at low volumes, and the economy of scale that the large corporations, large companies are able to enjoy, the MSMEs do not have that advantage. Additionally, the payments that are given to the MSMEs for the goods and services that they provide, they are usually delayed, which leads to them facing a liquidity crunch, and often they are forced to either upload their invoices on the TREDS platform, or they are forced to take loans, seek more credit also, and the operational cash is missing. Now, what are the suggestions that we can give to promote the contribution of MSMEs in India further? We can categorize it under a few headers and give specific suggestions. For example, to promote credit access, we can promote the collateral-free credits, collateral-free loans via the fintech platforms. Government can put in place such a mechanism where the MSMEs are able to access credit, access loans at the tap of a button. Likewise, there should be strict payment timelines under the MSME Samadhan scheme. There should be timelines which should be prescribed to avoid delayed payments to the MSMEs so that they don't face liquidity crunch. To ease the compliance burden upon the MSMEs, we can promote the single window clearance for all the compliances required from the MSMEs. We can explore the setting up of an MSME coordination council, or for each state there can be state-wise facilitation councils. The GST registration procedure for the MSMEs should be simplified. Likewise, to promote the technology adoption by the MSMEs, there can be a digital MSME 2.0, which will ensure that they have cyber security, get access to cloud computing, digital marketing, and they can adopt the artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and the latest technologies available. We can promote the setting up of innovation and incubation hubs. At the research institutions in India, there can be innovation and incubation hubs, for example, at the IITs, at the Indian Institute of Science. Additionally, for the workforce employed in the MSMEs, we can ensure the payment of minimum wages and they have access to the insurance. And for that, we need to bring the MSMEs into the formal sector through the registration. To ensure their skilling, we can promote the initiatives of skilling for the MSMEs under Skill India, Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana. To ensure the infrastructure building for the promotion of MSMEs, we can set up the industrial parks where we can promote the setting up of MSMEs, incentivize the setting up of clusters of MSMEs at such industrial parks. Now, there is a mains practice question also. MSMEs contribute significantly to employment and GDP growth in India. Discuss the key challenges faced by the MSMEs. Analyze the government initiatives to support this sector and provide suggestions for further strengthening the MSME ecosystem. Please try to write it. Now, the next article is related to the bioeconomy of India. The context behind it is the India Bioeconomy Report, which has been released by the Department of Biotechnology. This report has pegged the value of India's bioeconomy in 2024 at $165 billion, up from $151 billion in 2023, and now it accounts for 4.2% of India's GDP. Therefore, it is significant. So, we will discuss the sectors of bioeconomy, the policy measures taken by the government to promote bioeconomy in India and its future prospects. This is important in GS3 under the topics economy and biotechnology. First, what does this term mean? What does bioeconomy mean? Bioeconomy, as per FAO, that is United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, means the production, utilization, conservation, and regeneration of the biological resources to provide sustainable solutions. These can be under various sectors. The sectors identified by the India Biotechnology Report are bioindustrial, bioresearch and bio-IT, bioagriculture, biopharma and biomedical. Now, what do these sectors signify? In biopharma, it includes the development of pharmaceuticals, medical devices, diagnostics and lab-grown organoids. So it is focusing upon areas like cancer immunotherapy, gene editing, precision medicine, biologics, and it includes the medical technology known as medtech and diagnostics. When we look at bioagriculture, it focuses upon agricultural biotechnology, essentially covering the genetically modified crops, precision agriculture, bio-based products, for example BT cotton, which is quite famous. It highlights the role of biotechnology in boosting the yields of agriculture in India. In bioindustrial sector, it deals with the bio-based chemicals, the products created using enzymes, biosynthetic processes and recombinant DNA technology. So what will it include? It includes biofuels, bioplastics, biodegradable plastics, biogas and enzymatic applications across industries from beverages to detergents. Likewise, the bio-IT services includes the clinical trials, contract research, biotech software, databases, specialized equipment and bioscience education and services. Among these sectors, the major contribution is coming from the side of bio-industrial sector in the bioeconomy, contributing to 48% of bioeconomy, followed by biopharma contributing to more than 1/3 at 35%, and then bioagri and bio-IT and bio-research. Now let's look at the observations of the India Bioeconomy Report 2024. It has observed that the bioeconomy in India has been growing. In 2023, it was valued at $151 billion. Now it is $165 billion. So the growth rate year on year is about 10%. And the target that India has set is to achieve a valuation of $300 billion by 2030 for India's bioeconomy. Have we achieved something? Yes, there are a few major achievements for India's bioeconomy. For example, in terms of vaccine manufacturing, we have come quite far. India supplies 25% of the World Health Organization's vaccines now, because we are able to produce vaccines at a lower cost. And the Serum Institute of India's global share in the vaccines has risen to 24%. We have developed indigenous vaccines also. For example, the human papilloma virus HPV vaccine developed by CeraVac. The ZyCoV-D, which is a DNA-based COVID vaccine, has been developed by Cadila Healthcare. Again, indigenous vaccines developed in India. Likewise, in the adoption of biofuels, we are spearheading. For example, the ethanol blending has come to 12%, the blending of ethanol in petrol. We are the third largest producer of ethanol globally now. To ensure that the startups are also growing in the bioeconomy, in the biotech sector, there are about the 1,776 new biotech startups which have been added in the bioeconomy sector. Additionally, innovations are promoted. For example, the CAR T-cell therapy has been promoted for the cancer treatment, and the AI-powered diagnostics is being adopted. The CRISPR-based tests are also being done now. These are some of the major achievements for India's bioeconomy. Now let's discuss the segments and their individual contributions also. In the bioindustrial sector, the main contributors are the alcoholic beverages, which have about 31% share, followed by the biofuels, for example, the adoption of ethanol, followed by the enzymes. The enzymatic products include the textile sector, detergents, food industries, etc. When we look at the biopharma sector within bioeconomy, there has been the adoption and production of vaccines. There are about 3 billion plus doses which are produced annually in India right now. And there is the adoption of biosimilars also. What are biosimilars? The biosimilars are those drugs which are manufactured. They are very similar to the original drugs. Their safety, their efficacy is quite high. They are produced from the natural resources, and their cost is lower as compared to the original drugs, and their adoption is increasing because of their affordability, because of their low cost. We have a market of about $13 billion of the biosimilars also. And additionally, there is the contribution of diagnostics in biopharma, contributing to more than $19 billion, and adoption of AI-driven tools also. In bioagriculture, there is the adoption of BT cotton, which accounts for more than 95% of the cotton grown in India now, and the adoption of biofertilizers, which is also a more than $1 billion market in India. Likewise, in the bioservices, there is the adoption of bio-IT, the adoption of artificial intelligence, data analytics, which is used in biotechnology sector also. These are the major contributors, the drivers of growth in the bioeconomy in India. Now, what are the steps taken by the government to promote the bioeconomy in India? The policy and regulatory reforms taken up. One, the government came up with the Bio-E3 policy. The Bio-E3 policy means the biotechnology for economy, environment, and employment. That is the adoption of biotechnology for economic growth, environmental protection, and for employment generation. So the focus here is upon the biomanufacturing. It will ensure sustainability in the employment generation also. For example, the setting up of biofoundries. Likewise, there is the establishment of a bio-RRAP portal, that is Biotechnology Research Regulatory Approval Portal. Through this portal, the request for the approval of the biological research is streamlined, and it is given without any delay. There are the IP guidelines. They provide the flexible licensing for the public funded research. Through the National Medical Devices Policy, single window clearances are given to ensure that the production of the medical devices is done in India. We are not dependent upon the imports, saving the forex reserves also. There is the adoption of the green hydrogen mission, again to ensure that we have a sustainable fuel. And there are investments and infrastructure building for the bioeconomy also. For example, the promotion of the foreign direct investment, and it has been to the tune of more than $1 billion in pharma and medtech sector, that is medical technology sector, in 2023 itself. There is the adoption of production linked incentive schemes to ensure that there is the building of economy scale, there is more production by the industries in the pharma sector, in the production of medical devices especially. There is the setting up of bio incubators with support from the government. Already 95 plus bio incubators are there in India. Likewise, what is the socio-economic impact of the promotion of the bioeconomy in India? One, it will lead to employment generation. As per the India Biotechnology report, it will lead to the generation of more than 4 million jobs, direct plus indirect, and it will ensure the promotion of the MSME sector also, because 90% of biotech sector is comprised of the MSMEs only. The large companies are fewer in the biotech sector. Likewise, the vaccine leadership that India has achieved, now it will be further promoted. Now the Serum Institute of India supplies 65% of the global child vaccines, again because of the low cost production. And it will lead to further affordability of the products, as biosimilars, they reduce the cancer treatment costs, for example, by 65%, the biosimilar drugs, and it will contribute to the rural development also, because the biofuels, they support more than 3.5 million farmers in India. Now, why do we need a sustainable and circular bioeconomy? Why is government investing here? Because of the global challenges, for example, the climate change, ecosystem degradation. Therefore, we need to find newer ways of producing and consuming which are sustainable in nature. For example, the creation of jobs, the creation of green jobs especially, for which we can seek funds from the Western world also, and the renewal and modernization of the industrial infrastructure which is based upon agriculture, forestry, aquaculture and other such sustainable industries. And it will ensure that we are able to tackle with the climate change, the climate mitigation, carbon neutrality, since India also has the nationally determined contributions as per the Paris aim, and we want to reduce our atmospheric emissions and dependence on the fossil resources. Plus, it will ensure the ecosystem and biodiversity restoration also, because it is aligned with the sustainable development goals and will be able to recover a part of our degraded ecosystem as well. Now, what are the challenges of bioeconomy adoption in India? One, there are regulatory hurdles. For example, the adoption of genetically modified crops, they need approval. First from the Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee, then from the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and especially for the genetically modified food crops, it is quite difficult. Then there are feedstock shortages for the biofuels also, and we need more innovation. For example, we need to adopt the artificial intelligence, which is evolving very fast in the biotech sector, and we need to come up with some innovative solutions for the waste to energy conversion also, because India is an energy hungry country. Likewise, there has been some pandemic induced volatility also, because of which the bioeconomy's growth is stifled a little in India. So what are its future prospects, the outlook for India and the global bioeconomy outlook? Globally, it is predicted that by 2050, it will account for about $30 trillion. It will account for 12% of the global GDP. India's rank currently in bioeconomies among the top 5 bioeconomies, and by 2050 it is projected that it will contribute to 6.5 to 12% of India's GDP. Currently it is about 4.25%. For the 2030, it is projected that bioeconomy will be having a valuation of $300 billion in India, and it will create about 35 million jobs in India by 2030. Therefore, the focus areas that the government is focusing upon are the setting up of artificial intelligence hubs, biomanufacturing and climate resilient agriculture. And we can see that the valuation of India's bioeconomy has been increasing continuously in the past 5 years. There is a means practice question also. Bioeconomy is emerging as a key driver of sustainable development. Discuss the current status of bioeconomy in India, the challenges that it faces and the potential that it holds for the future economic growth. Please try to write it. Now the next article is related to the geopolitics of Syria. This is important in GS2 under the topic Effect of Politics and Policies of Developed and Developing Countries on India's Interests. Before coming to the article, let's discuss the background of the Syrian crisis. First, let's have a look at the map of Syria. Syria is a country in West Asia which is sharing its boundary with Turkey, Lebanon, Israel, Jordan and Iraq. It also has a boundary with the Mediterranean Sea as well. Let's look at the regimes in Syria starting from 2011 because we want to focus upon the earlier regime which was under the ex-president of Syria, President Bashar al-Assad, and the current Syrian president. In 2011, the protests erupted against the President Bashar al-Assad regime. There was a situation of civil war in Syria, and that time the Western nations, they thought that now the era of President Assad is over, his days are outnumbered and he will be going out of power. Therefore, USA sought his resignation. The European Union backed the rebels at that time against President Assad, and Turkey and Saudi Arabia, they were also involved to some extent, supporting various factions through some proxies in Syria. But Assad got help from Iran, Russia and Hezbollah. Assad belongs to the Alawite community. Alawite is an offshoot of the Shia sect in Islam, and he got support from Iran on the ground. Russia supported aerially by conducting aerial strikes in those areas which were held by the rebels in Syria, and also he was supported by Hezbollah, which had the backing of Iran also. Then in 2015, the situation came that before the Russian intervention in 2015, the area controlled by Bashar al-Assad in Syria was limited to only from Damascus to the coastal region, that is very less area was controlled by Bashar al-Assad. After that, Russia intervened, and therefore it came to 2020 when most of Syria was controlled by Assad regime except the Idlib and the Kurdish territories. The Kurdish territories are in the northern part of Syria, and these are having autonomy to an extent in the border region with Turkey because they bought peace with the President Bashar al-Assad regime at that time. Now come forward to 2025. At the end of 2024, in December 2024, the rebels, they captured Damascus, and now President Ahmad al-Shara is the president in Syria, and he is controlling Damascus and these areas. This map is as of December 2024. Now, what are the powers at play in Syria? Which countries have more interest in Syria and they are involved there? One significant is the Israel versus Iran role in Syria. Israel have certain goals. For example, it wanted to disrupt the Iranian supplies for Hezbollah and the other Shia militias who were getting support from Iran, and it wanted to stop the militias from advancing towards Israel. The de facto border between Syria and Israel is the Golan Heights, and it wanted to weaken Iran's presence in Syria. On the other hand, Iran has the only ally in the region, that is Syria, and it also serves as a vital link with Hezbollah. Syria serving as the Iran's link with Hezbollah, which is functioning in Syria, and it wanted to extend its military influence from Tehran to southern Lebanon. So it wanted to put a strategic pressure on Israel by building military infrastructure and by deploying Shia militias. Now, what is the interest of Turkey in Syria? Turkey wanted to carve out a buffer zone. It wanted to carve out a buffer zone where it will be driving out the Kurdish People's Protection Units, that is the YPG militias, out of this buffer. It wants to keep this buffer zone as the safe zone, as the zone of peace, where it wants to settle some of the Syrian refugees in Turkey. Then there is the role of Russia also. Russia wanted to save Assad. Obviously, it wanted to bolster Russia's position in West Asia because it has a naval base in Tartus, and it wanted to send a message to the Western nations also that it also has presence in West Asia through the Tartus naval base and by supporting President Assad regime. But it did not want to get stuck also simultaneously, just like it got stuck in Afghanistan. First the Soviet got stuck and then the US got stuck in Afghanistan. Therefore, it wanted that the regime does not collapse, because if it collapses, it will result into chaos and it will become a breeding ground for the terrorists. Now, what is the role of US? US wanted to withdraw from there. Why? Because US was involved in the West Asian geopolitics primarily to ensure that it meets its energy needs. It was importing oil and natural gas from there. But once the shale oil was discovered in US, there was a boom of shale oil in US. It wanted to withdraw from there. Simultaneously, there were thoughts that USA is overweighted, over-involved in the Middle East, and it is underweighted, under-involved in Asia, and it wanted to tackle China. But at the same time, there was pressure from the allies also. The pressure from the allies to come up with a solution, because there was a refugee crisis. The refugees were pouring into European Union who wanted a peaceful solution, who wanted peace there. And if the interventionism fails, then it would have led to the consolidation of the Islamic State. Now, coming to the article, presently the Syrian president is Ahmad al-Shara, and the West is closely watching the President Ahmad al-Shara in Syria, because they want to ensure that he reigns in the Islamist jihadis in Syria, because the Islamist jihadis in Syria are now killing hundreds of Alawites, the sect to which President Assad belonged, and they want to ensure that there is an inclusive government which is put in place with effective institutions to maintain order in the country where it has seen years of civil war, and it want to prevent the resurgence of the Islamic State or Al-Qaeda. Therefore, the European envoys have made it clear that cracking down on the jihadi fighters was their top priority, and the international support which Syria is getting will be getting only if it is cracking down upon the jihadi fighters. It would evaporate unless it takes a decisive action against the jihadi fighters. There is no blank check for the new authorities in power in Syria. Now, the next article is related to the Religious Freedom Report. It has been released by the US Commission on International Religious Freedom. This is important in GS2 under the topic Effect of Politics and Policies of Developing and Developed Countries on India's Interests. First, let's have a brief overview regarding the US Commission on International Religious Freedom. This is an independent body. This is an independent bipartisan US federal government agency. It has been established as per the 1998 International Religious Freedom Act of USA. What are its functions? It reviews the facts and circumstances of violations of religious freedom internationally in the other countries, and it makes policy recommendations to the US President, Secretary of State, US Congress. What does it comprise of? There are 9 commissioners in the US Commission who are appointed by the President or congressional leaders of each political party, and it submits an annual report. This annual report assesses the US government implementation of the International Religious Freedoms Act, and it highlights the countries of particular concern. It highlights those countries where the religious freedoms are being violated and who are engaging in severe religious freedom violations. It documents the conditions of the religious freedoms in many countries, including India. Also, there is the Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is of relevance here. It states that everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience and religion. This right includes the freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom either alone or in community with others in public or private to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship and observance. Now, coming to the article, the US panel has released its latest religious freedom report, which says that minorities in India are facing deteriorating treatment. They are not treated well in India, and for the first time it has recommended targeted sanctions against the RAW itself, the Research and Analysis Wing of India, over its alleged involvement in the assassination plots against 6 separatists. The report designated India as the country of a particular concern, and it has grouped India with 15 other countries, which are Afghanistan, Russia, China, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, as a country of concern. But the Ministry of External Affairs has called this report biased and politically motivated. The persistent attempts of the US Commission on International Religious Freedom to misrepresent isolated incidents and to cast aspersions on India's vibrant multicultural society is a deliberate agenda rather than a genuine concern for religious freedom. And the MEA has observed that such efforts to undermine India's standing as a beacon of democracy and tolerance will not succeed. Rather, it is the US CIRF itself that should be designated as an entity of concern. Therefore, these recommendations are not even binding and rejected by India. Now, the next article is related to the National Judicial Appointments Commission and the veto power which is embedded in it. This is important in GS2 under the topic Structure, Functioning and Organization of the Judiciary. First, let's have a look at the historical evolution of the judicial appointments in India. In 1950, the federal court judges, who were the judges in the pre-independence India, transitioned to the Supreme Court. They were transferred to the Supreme Court, they became the Supreme Court judges, and the first Chief Justice of India was Justice Harilal Kania. From 1950 to 1977, there was the dominance of the executive in the appointment of the Supreme Court judges. The government appointed the judges. The judiciary was interpreting the constitution, was interpreting the laws, it was even striking down the laws, but the appointment remained in the hands of the executive. But in 1970s, there was political interference. For example, in 1973, Indira Gandhi government superseded 3 senior judges to appoint Justice A.N. Ray as the Chief Justice of India. Till then, the practice was to appoint the senior-most justice of the Supreme Court as the Chief Justice of India, but this practice was violated. In 1977, again, Justice Beg was made the Chief Justice of India, superseding the senior-most Justice H.R. Khanna. What was the response of the judiciary? It came up with the establishment of collegium system to take up the judicial appointments in its own hands and to curb the executive interference. The collegium system was established through 3 cases, the 3 judges' cases. In the first judge's case, it was interpreted that the word consultation, which is contained in Article 124, does not mean concurrence. It simply means an exchange of opinions, essentially retaining the executive primacy in the appointment of the Supreme Court justices. But the story changed from the second judge's case onwards. Judiciary cannot legislate, it can only interpret the constitution. So it was using the word consultation in Article 124 to establish the collegium system. Article 124 says that the President shall consult the Chief Justice of India and such other Supreme Court and High Court judges for the appointment of the higher judiciary, for the appointments in the Supreme Court. Now the Supreme Court interpreted in the second judge's case that the word consultation in Article 124 means concurrence. That is, the opinion given by the Chief Justice of India shall be binding. And the Chief Justice of India shall consult 2 senior-most judges of the Supreme Court as per the second judge's case before giving his opinion. And it shall be binding upon the President for the appointment of the Supreme Court judges. And in the third judge's case, it led to the establishment of the proper collegium system. The court said that the Chief Justice of India shall consult not 2 but 4 senior-most judges of the Supreme Court for giving his opinion, and his opinion shall be binding. That is the opinion of the collegium system. So the judiciary got the primacy in the appointments, and this judicial primacy is part of the basic structure now. Now, when we look at the structure, the Supreme Court Collegium consists of the Chief Justice of India and 4 senior-most judges, and it appoints the Supreme Court judges, the Chief Justices of the High Courts, and it transfers the High Court judges also. When the High Court appointments are taken into account, the High Court Collegium consists of the Chief Justice of India and 2 senior-most judges of the Supreme Court. Now coming to the National Judicial Appointments Commission, it was the proposed alternative which was given by the government, and the government came up with the 99th Constitutional Amendment Act in 2014. The NJAC Act was enacted to replace the collegium system because there were allegations of lack of transparency, of opacity, nepotism, favoritism in the collegium, and it got widespread support also. The NJAC, when it was introduced, it got support in the Lok Sabha. 367 MPs in the Lok Sabha voted in favor and there was no opposition in Lok Sabha. Likewise in Rajya Sabha, the only opposition came from Ram Jethmalani, again having a legal background. Then it was ratified by 16 states also, including the Congress ruled and left ruled states. Because it was reducing the concentration of power, the collegium system concentrates the power in the hands of the judiciary for the judicial appointments. The NJAC was supposed to comprise of the Chief Justice of India as the chairperson, 2 senior Supreme Court judges, the Union Law Minister and 2 eminent persons. These 2 eminent persons were to be selected by a committee of the Chief Justice of India, the Prime Minister and the Leader of Opposition. And 1 out of these 2 eminent persons was to be from the marginalized groups. And there was a veto power. This veto power was that any 2 members of this NJAC could block the appointments. If any 2 members of the NJAC did not agree with an appointment, that appointment shall not take place. Now, why this NJAC was struck down by the Supreme Court? It was observed that the veto power which was given in the National Judicial Appointments Commission composition and its working, it risked the dominance of the executive. The law minister plus 2 eminent members, they could override the opinion of the 3 judges in the National Judicial Appointments Commission. Therefore, the Supreme Court ruled by a 4-1 majority that it violated judicial independence. The only dissent came from the side of Justice Chelameshwar. Justice Chelameshwar supported the National Judicial Appointments Commission and has openly talked about the opacity, the favoritism in the collegium system. Now, was it a missed opportunity? Yes. Some people suggested that it could have been suggested that the Chief Justice of India's vote could have been the casting vote to ensure the judicial primacy in the appointments. Or the ex-Supreme Court Judge Sanjay Kishan Kaul has argued that the NJAC could have been put in place after some changes, after some tweaks. So the current debate is that the collegium's functioning is opaque. On the other side, there are concerns over the executive influence in case NJAC is adopted as it is. And the NJAC judgment has ensured that any new law which the parliament may enact has to preserve the judiciary's primacy to survive the scrutiny of the Supreme Court. Now, the next article is related to the Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana. This is important in GS2 under the topic Health. Before coming to the article, let's have a brief overview regarding the Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana. This is a centrally sponsored direct benefit transfer scheme which was launched in 2017. What are its objectives? It seeks to provide partial compensation for the wage loss in terms of the cash incentives that it gives if the women are taking rest before and after the delivery of the first child. It is to improve the health-seeking behavior among the pregnant women and the lactating mothers. What are its features? It provides maternity benefit to the socially and economically disadvantaged women. The first 2 living children of women, in that case, the cash incentive is provided if the second child is a girl. Rupees 5,000 is provided to the expecting mothers. This 5,000 rupees is provided in 3 installments. The first installment of 1,000 rupees is given at the time of the registration of the pregnancy. The second installment of 2,000 rupees is given after completing 6 months of pregnancy and receiving at least 1 antenatal checkup. The third installment of again 2,000 rupees is given after the birth and registration of the birth and the first cycle of immunization for the BCG, OPV, DPT and the hepatitis B vaccines by the child. Additionally, 1,000 rupees is provided under the Janani Suraksha Yojana for the post-institutional delivery. And in case there is a miscarriage or stillbirth, then the further births will be treated as fresh cases for providing cash incentives under the Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana. Now coming to the article, it has been alleged that the Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana is severely underfunded and it is violating the provisions of the National Food Security Act also. The National Food Security Act 2013 mandates that a minimum financial aid of 6,000 rupees should be provided per child birth by the government, and it should be provided to all pregnant women except those who are working in the formal sector. They are all entitled to the maternity benefits. The Minister of State for Women and Child Development has stated that the 48% of 53 lakh enrolled beneficiaries were paid under the scheme in 2023-24. This is the lowest percentage from 2019-20 onwards. Regarding the delays in the disbursal of the benefits, the minister stated that a new portal, Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana software, was launched in March 2023, and through this Aadhaar authentication was done so that the funds are transferred directly to the Aadhaar seeded bank accounts. And the implementation of the scheme using the new software is done by the states and the union territories, and the funds are released to the states provided they utilize the funds available in their account online. Now, the next article is related to the PM-SHRI scheme. This is important in GS2 under the topic education. PM-SHRI scheme is a centrally sponsored scheme. The objective is to develop more than 14,500 schools in India by strengthening the existing schools only. The existing schools which are managed by the central government, state governments, UT governments, the local bodies, etc. The purpose will be to nurture the students, to ensure that they are engaged in productive activities, they become contributing citizens for an equitable, inclusive and plural society as per the mandate of the new education policy 2020. And this scheme will be functioning from 2022-23 to 2026-27. Then the responsibility will be upon the states and the union territories to maintain the benchmarks which will be achieved by the PM-SHRI schools. The selection of the PM-SHRI schools who will be selected for the incentives will be done through the challenge mode. The schools will be competing for the selection. Now, what are the features of the PM-SHRI scheme? The selected schools, they will be acting as the exemplar schools. They will be offering mentorship to the other schools in their vicinity so that they can also improve their quality of education. They will be functioning as green schools which are environmentally friendly. The pedagogy in these schools will be more experimental, more holistic, integrated, play-based, toy-based, particularly in the foundational years, inquiry-driven to encourage the spirit of inquiry, discovery-oriented, learner-centric, discussion-based, flexible and enjoyable rather than on the rote learning-based system. The focus will be on the learning outcomes of every child in every grade. The assessment will be based upon the conceptual understanding, upon the application of the knowledge to real life situations. A linkage of these schools will be done with the sector skill councils and the local industry so that the children will be having better employment prospects, their employability will be better in future. A school quality assessment framework will also be put in place which will specify the key performance indicators to measure the outcomes from these schools. Now, coming to the article, the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan funds have been withheld for the states which have not entered into agreements for separate schemes like PM-SHRI. The Parliamentary Standing Committee has noted. The committee has noted that this reasoning to withhold the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan funds is not factual or justified, as the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan is dated back prior to the PM-SHRI scheme and it helps the state in achieving their targets of the Right to Education Act. The Right to Education Act is a law passed by the Parliament and it confers education as a fundamental right onto every child. Therefore, the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan as a scheme enforces this fundamental right, the right to education, and it cannot be bypassed by the new education policy, which is an executive policy statement. Now, this has come amid a war of words between Tamil Nadu government and the centre over the release of 2,000 crore rupees under the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan. The Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu had expressed concern over the insistence of the central government on linking the funds to the implementation of the new education policy and reiterated the government's unwavering commitment to its two-language policy. Thank you.